This is a transmission. If anyone can hear me, if there's anyone left to hear me, this is my voice, sent into the dark. My name doesn't matter anymore. No names do. Maybe no one is listening. Maybe I'm just speaking to the empty air, but I have to believe that someone, somewhere, might still be out there. I don't know how much time is left, or if time even matters anymore. This station was meant to go offline yesterday, but I kept it running. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Or maybe it's just human nature to hold on to something, anything, when everything else is gone. I've been broadcasting for days. At first I thought people might respond, that someone, anyone, would send a signal back. But the lines have been dead for hours now. The cities went first, then the towns. And now, silence. Still, I speak. Not because I think I'll be heard, but because I refuse to let the last word spoken by our kind be the sound of destruction. If this is truly the end, then let there be a voice in the dark. I pause. The static hums in my ears, a low, unbroken whisper that never answers back. It used to be filled with voices, news reports, emergency signals, survivors calling out coordinates, hoping for rescue. Now it's just nothing. I switch frequencies, scrolling through empty channels, searching for even the faintest sign of life. There's nothing but dead air, a hollow, endless quiet stretching across the world. I wonder how long I can do this before I start hearing things that aren't there, before the static turns into voices in my head. Maybe that's already happening. Maybe I'm just talking to myself now. But if you're out there, if somehow you're hearing this, know that you're not alone, or at least you weren't. This is my last transmission, not because I want it to be, but because soon there won't be anything left to transmit. The generators are failing. I've stretched out the fuel as long as I could, rationing every bit of power to keep this signal alive. But I can hear the station dying. Each flicker of the lights, each strained hum of the equipment tells me this is the end. I could lie. I could tell you there's hope, that someone is coming, that there's still a way out. But there's nothing left beyond these walls. No rescue, no safe zones, no one left to save us. Just the silence growing louder every second. So this is it, the last broadcast. I don't know if it will matter. I don't know if anyone will hear, but I can't let it end in silence. If this is the last voice the world will ever hear, then let it be one that refuses to fade quietly. I haven't told you how it happened, have I? Maybe you already know. Maybe you were there watching as it all fell apart. Or maybe you're listening from somewhere untouched. Some dark corner of the world where the sky still looks the same, where the air isn't thick with the weight of everything that's been lost. If that's the case, if you somehow survived, without knowing, I don't know whether to envy you or pity you. It started slowly, warnings buried under politics, under doubt, under the foolish belief that we always had more time. We didn't. By the time they admitted the truth, the end had already begun. I could tell you the details, the reports, the scientists, the desperate attempts to stop it. But none of that matters anymore. What matters is that it wasn't enough. And now, here we are. I think about all the voices that came before mine. The news anchors reporting on the first wave of destruction, the scientists trying to explain it, the leaders scrambling to control what could never be controlled, then the civilians, the survivors, the ones who called in begging for help that would never come. Now there's only me. I don't know why I'm still talking. Maybe because once I stop, it means it's really over. I always thought the end of the world would be loud. Explosions, sirens, screaming. But it turns out the end is quiet. No one is fighting anymore. No one is running. It's just the silence now. A silence so deep, so complete, that it feels like even time has stopped. But if you're still out there, if you can hear me, then the world isn't completely gone yet. Not yet. There were warnings, of course, there always are, scattered reports, small mentions buried between political scandals and economic forecasts, a scientist raising a red flag, a journalist whispering that something wasn't right. But warnings don't matter if no one listens. It started with official bulletins, brief, vague notices advising people to remain aware, to prepare for potential disruptions. No one paid much attention. After all, there were always potential disruptions, protests in one part of the world, a trade crisis in another. What was one more problem added to the pile? Then came the changes, flights canceled without explanation, certain regions mysteriously cut off from communication, foreign embassies quietly evacuating their personnel. The governments called it precautionary. Experts dismissed the concerns, but those who paid attention, those who saw the signs, began whispering that something was deeply, terribly wrong. By the time people started to question, it was too late. The warnings weren't just ignored, they were erased, rewritten, covered up beneath layers of misinformation and distraction. The truth was too big, too terrifying to face, and so we did what we do best. We looked away, until looking away was no longer an option. The reports were easy to dismiss at first, a city where the lights flickered strangely, a town where people swore the sky had changed, a research facility that went silent overnight, pieces of a puzzle scattered so far apart that no one could see the full picture. There were rumors of signals intercepted from places where no signals should have been, of shadows moving in ways that defied nature. Then came the disappearances, isolated at first, individuals vanishing without a trace, then entire neighborhoods left eerily abandoned, doors unlocked, meals half-eaten on kitchen tables, no struggle, no signs of evacuation, just gone. Scientists tried to explain. Electromagnetic interference, mass hysteria, gas leaks, psychological contagion, theories stacked on top of theories, none of them fitting quite right. But the world wanted answers, and so answers were given. People believed what made them feel safe. They always do. But some of us knew better. We listened to the spaces between the news reports, to the things unsaid. We watched the faces of those in power, saw their fear hidden behind careful words. They knew. They had known for a long time. And still, they told us to remain calm. The news anchors were composed, their voices steady. The government officials stood behind podiums, their faces carefully neutral. There was nothing to be concerned about, they said. The world was stable. The situation was under control. But the cracks were showing. Footage from affected areas was carefully cropped. Reports heavily edited. The usual talking heads debated solutions without ever addressing the real problem. Scientists who questioned the narrative suddenly vanished from the media circuit. Their research quietly retracted. The public wanted reassurance, and reassurance was given. Travel restrictions were temporary. Military mobilizations were routine exercises. Disruptions to power grids and communication networks were technical malfunctions. The language was crafted to soothe, to keep people moving through their daily routines without asking the wrong questions. Some believed it. Others saw through the lies. But by then, it didn't matter. The narrative was set, the machinery of control fully engaged. The warnings had been buried beneath a mountain of manufactured normalcy. And then, one by one, the voices of authority began to disappear. At first, it was subtle. Government briefings became infrequent, then ceased altogether. News stations looped pre-recorded broadcasts, the same recycled messages repeating endlessly. Then, the silence spread. Emergency hotlines stopped responding. Automated messages replaced human voices, vague assurances playing on a loop. The internet slowed, then flickered, then collapsed entirely. Those who tried to flee found highways gridlocked with abandoned cars, transportation hubs eerily vacant. The world had stopped moving. frozen in the quiet grip of something far worse than panic. And then the final message came, not from a leader, not from a scientist, but from a nameless operator speaking through a failing transmission. The voice was flat, devoid of emotion. We regret to inform you that there are no further updates. Please remain where you are. Help will not be coming. Then static, and for the first time, the world understood. There was no control. There was no plan. We were on our own. I still have the recordings. They're old now, buried beneath the weight of everything that came after. But I play them anyway, as if hearing those voices might somehow change what happened. There was a scientist, Dr. Samuel Wren, who tried to warn us. He spoke of patterns, of anomalies in the data, of something vast and inescapable moving toward us. He pleaded for action, for preparation. He was laughed off stage, called a doomsayer. His funding was revoked. His research disappeared. Then there was the journalist, Elise Carter, who uncovered classified reports detailing early disappearances. She wrote article after article, each more urgent than the last. No one published them. Eventually, she vanished too. I listen to their words now, their warnings crackling through the speakers, and wonder how different things might have been if we had just listened, if we had believed. But belief is a luxury of the past. The future no longer exists, and all we have left are echoes of failure. In the final days, the world spoke all at once. Governments, once so careful with their words, began sending desperate transmissions, unfiltered, unpolished, raw. Leaders, once stoic and composed, now begged for aid, pleaded for understanding. The messages were shaky, their voices trembling beneath the weight of what they had tried to contain. Then came the emergency broadcasts, warnings from collapsing nations, last-ditch evacuation orders, final declarations of surrender. Some were frantic, filled with the chaos of crumbling cities and desperate crowds. Others were quiet, resigned, as if those speaking had already accepted what was coming. I've collected them, every last one. I play them sometimes, letting their voices fill the silence. Not because I need to remember, but because I refuse to forget. And now here I am, the last broadcaster, the last voice on an empty frequency. And still, I send my signal into the dark, because someone, somewhere, must be listening. Even if I'll never hear them answer, the signal has been quiet for too long. Then suddenly, voices. A man, his breath ragged, his words tumbling out too fast. He says he's trapped beneath the rubble of a collapsed building. He was with others, but their voices have gone silent. He begs for someone to come, for anyone to hear him. A woman sobs, barely able to form words. She's lost her children. They were right beside her, and then they weren't. She repeats their names over and over, as if saying them might bring them back. A family speaks together, their voices shaking but steady. They know what's coming. They aren't asking for rescue. They just want to leave a message, to say that they were here, that they loved each other. They ask if anyone survives, for their names to be remembered. Then the line cuts out. The voices come in waves, pleas, prayers, desperate confessions. Some beg for salvation. Others just want to know they weren't alone in the end. I listen to every single one, because soon there won't be any more. I don't speak. For the first time since this broadcast began, I don't know what to say. The weight of it all presses against my chest. The voices, their fear, their grief, linger in the air, even after the static swallows them whole. I try to find words, but what can I say? There's no reassurance I can offer, no comfort that wouldn't be a lie. I could pretend that someone is listening, that help is coming, that this isn't the end, but I won't do that. Instead, I let the silence stretch. And maybe it's fitting, maybe it's the only thing that makes sense, because if the world is ending, should it not end in quiet? They told us there were contingency plans, that if the worst happened, there would be escape routes, safe zones, Emergency protocols, they lied. I have the reports. The shelters meant to house survivors, overrun. The military outposts designated as last stands, empty. The ships that were supposed to carry people to safety, grounded, abandoned, some burning in the streets where crowds fought to board them. Some tried to run. The roads are littered with their remains. Vehicles that never made it, bodies of those who believed they could outrun what was coming. The airfields, once filled with desperate refugees, are silent now. There were rumors of final rocket launches, desperate last bids to escape. But if they ever left the ground, no one heard from them again. And now there is nowhere left to go. The last walls have crumbled. The last exits are sealed. There was a plan once. But now there is only this. The transmissions grow more frantic. The voices more desperate. A man shouts, coordinates into the radio, his voice hoarse. He says he found shelter, that there's room, that people should come now. But I've heard this before, and I know. By the time anyone reaches him, that shelter will be gone. Another voice, young, barely more than a child, whispers that they are alone, that they haven't seen another person in days, that they thought the world was playing a cruel joke, but now they know the truth. They ask if there's someone, anyone, who will answer. But when I speak their name, there is no reply. And then, the worst one of all, a single voice, repeating the same question over and over again. Please, is anyone out there? But there's no one left to answer. I don't know how much longer I can do this. For so long, I've tried to keep my voice steady, tried to be something constant in the chaos. But now the weight of it all is pressing down on me, and my hands won't stop shaking. My voice cracks. I can hear it, the way my words falter, the way silence stretches too long between them. I wonder if those listening can hear it too. If they can tell that I am unraveling, just like everything else. I think about the people who sent their final words into the void. I wonder if I should do the same. But I can't. Not yet. Because even now, even with nothing left, I keep hoping for one more voice, one more sign that I am not alone. But the airwaves are growing quiet, and I know what comes next. I've spent hours searching the frequencies, calling out, waiting. There is no one left to answer. I switch from channel to channel, listening for anything. A whisper, a fragment of a voice, but there is only silence, deep and unbroken. And suddenly, I know the truth. I am the last voice on these airwaves, the last broadcaster speaking into an empty world. I feel it settle in my chest, heavy and suffocating. The realization that this isn't just the end of a broadcast, it's the end of everything. I close my eyes, I take a breath, and I steady myself. Because if this is the last voice the world will ever hear, then I will make it count. I will speak until the signal fades, and when it does, I will let the silence take me too. The final hour approaches and the world fractures in two. Some fight against the inevitable. In the last pockets of civilization, riots break out, clashes over supplies, over space, over the meaningless scraps of what used to matter. People break into abandoned stores, not for food, but for things they can no longer use. Jewelry, electronics, meaningless possessions that will never hold value again. Perhaps it's instinct, the need to take, to own, to have control over something before everything is lost. Others turn to faith. The streets fill with prayer. People kneel, faces turn to the sky, waiting for deliverance that will never come. Churches and temples overflow, voices rising in desperate hymns. Some speak of salvation, some speak of judgment, some only whisper apologies to whatever gods they believe might be listening. And then there are those who simply sit in silence. No chaos, no prayers, just quiet acceptance. They gather on rooftops and in open fields, watching the horizon, waiting. The end doesn't look the same for everyone, but it is coming all the same. And there is nowhere left to hide. The calls have changed. The pleas for help are gone. The anger, the panic, faded. What's left is something else, something quieter. People begin confessing, not to crimes, not to authorities. There are no laws anymore, no judgment left to fear. These confessions are deeper, rawer. They admit their regrets, their sins, the things they wish they could take back. Affairs hidden for years, betrayals never spoken aloud, moments of cruelty long buried but never forgotten. A man sobs as he confesses to a lie that destroyed his family. A woman admits she never loved her husband, that she spent decades pretending. A voice, barely a whisper, wonders if all of this is punishment. I don't know what they hope for. Absolution? Forgiveness? But there is no one left to grant it. Only the radio. Only the dark. I've never spoken about myself on this broadcast. Not really. But I suppose there's no point in keeping secrets anymore. I had a family. Once. A wife. A son. I don't know where they are now. We got separated in the first weeks, when the world still believed in escape. I told them I'd find them, that I'd follow, but I never did. I stayed behind. Stayed at this station, behind this microphone, telling people where to go, where to hide, who to trust. None of it mattered in the end. I tell myself they made it, that they found safety somewhere I couldn't follow. It's a lie, and I know it. But it's the only thing keeping me here. The only reason I haven't let the silence take me yet. I wonder if they're listening. If somehow they can still hear my voice. I wonder if they know that I tried. Not everyone accepts the truth. There are still those who believe this is temporary. That something, some government, some hidden force will fix it. That an answer exists, just beyond reach. They cling to old routines, dressing for jobs that no longer exist, checking emails that will never be answered. Others have created their own truths. I hear them on the airwaves, whispering about secret bunkers, shadow organizations, last-minute rescues. They swear the elite have left us behind, that the world will restart without us. They spread rumors, latch onto conspiracies as if believing in a lie is better than facing the truth. And then there are those who refuse to believe in anything at all. They laugh, they mock, they call this a hoax, a simulation, a dream. They scream at the sky, daring it to prove them wrong, but the sky does not answer. The end is coming. Whether they believe in it or not, a voice comes through the static. Software young, a child. She asks if angels will take them away. She says her mother told her not to be afraid, that they will be together again in the next life. But she doesn't understand. She just wants to know if it will hurt, if it will be quick, if she will see her mother again. I try to speak, try to find words that will make this easier, that will comfort her. But my voice catches in my throat. She waits. Then, after a long pause, she says, okay, that she will be brave, that she is ready, and then she is gone. I sit in silence for a long time after that. The airwaves are growing quiet. The voices that filled the night, the screams, the confessions, the desperate pleas, they are fading. Some have found their peace. Others have made their choices. And I sit here listening to the last echoes of a dying world. I wonder what the last sound will be. A whisper? A prayer? The final breath of the last survivor? Or will it simply be silence? A silence so deep, so absolute, that even memory itself vanishes with it. I keep speaking, because as long as there is a voice, the world is not yet gone. Not yet. The lights are going out. One by one, the power grids fail, leaving entire cities swallowed by the dark. The last of the emergency beacons flicker and die. The glow of skyscrapers, once symbols of progress, now nothing but silent, empty husks. Even the stars seem dimmer, as if the universe itself is turning away. For a while, some places still held on, hospitals running on backup generators, small towns powered by whatever scraps of electricity they could salvage. But nothing lasts. Everything runs out eventually. Fuel, light, time. I listen as the world falls silent. No more news reports, no more distant chatter. The hum of technology, the invisible web that once connected us all, it's gone. Someone once told me that humanity's greatest fear isn't death, it's isolation. It's knowing that you're alone, that no one is coming. I think they were right. Because now, as the world fades to black, the silence feels heavier than anything else. And the worst part, I think I'm the only one left to hear it. The voices of authority have vanished. No more government briefings, no more orders from behind podiums. The leaders who once commanded nations, their voices, their presence, their promises, gone. If they had escape plans, if they had shelters built deep beneath the surface, it doesn't matter anymore. They have fallen silent, just like the rest. The emergency centers shut down days ago. Their last messages were vague, uncertain. Stay where you are. Help will come, but help never did. Some of them begged. I still have recordings. Government officials pleading for aid from allies who would never respond. Military commanders issuing orders to troops that no longer existed. Their words held power once. Now they're just echoes. And so, the world is leaderless. No one left to guide, to reassure, to lie. Just silence. And me. I've always wondered what it would feel like to be the last. Now I know. I switch frequencies, scanning for something, anything. A stray voice, a whisper, a heartbeat. But all I get is static, an endless, unbroken hum. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I thought there would be others. Survivors, scattered but holding on. People clinging to whatever life remains. Maybe they're out there, somewhere, waiting for a signal, just like I am. Or maybe I really am the last. The weight of it is crushing. To be the only voice left speaking into a void. Sending words into a world that can no longer listen. But I keep talking. Because if I stop, then it really is over. I listen. Beyond the static, there are still sounds. Faint. Distorted. Slipping through the dying frequencies. A distant explosion. The sharp crack of something collapsing. The final remnants of a world still breaking apart. I hear voices, but they aren't speaking to me. They are trapped in old recordings, caught in endless loops. A broken transmission, a half-finished message. Someone crying out for help that will never come. And then, in the distance, a scream. It doesn't last long. And then, nothing. For a moment, I wonder if I imagine it. If it was just my own mind creating ghosts in the silence. But does it even matter? Real or not, the outcome is the same. The world is disappearing. And soon I will too. I knew this was coming. The transmission is breaking down. I can hear it. Interference creeping in, swallowing the ends of my words, warping my voice into something unrecognizable. The signal is growing weaker. The power won't last much longer. This station was never meant to run indefinitely. I've stretched it as far as I could, keeping the generators alive with whatever scraps of fuel I could find. But there's nothing left. No more reserves. No more time. I should say something meaningful. Something that matters. But what do you say when you're the last voice left? When your words will be the last anyone ever hears? Maybe there is no right way to end. Maybe there is only the moment before the silence and then the silence itself. The interference is worsening. My voice is slipping away. Soon even the static will be gone. If you are out there, if somehow you are hearing this, I was here. I was here, and I spoke, and I tried. And now I fade. There's no survival, not anymore. I think I always knew that. Even in the early days, when people still believed in escape plans and underground bunkers, I understood that this wasn't a disaster we could recover from. This wasn't something we could outlast. But if survival is gone, what's left? I think about the ones who called in before the signal faded. The father who asked only that his daughter's name be remembered. The scientist who begged for someone, anyone, to preserve their research. The voices that whispered into the dark, not asking for help, not pleading for salvation, just wanting to know that someone, somewhere, had heard them. Maybe that's all that's left. Not survival, but memory, proof that we were here, that we existed, that we tried. I don't know if anyone will find this broadcast, if some distant intelligence will stumble upon our last words. Long after we're gone, maybe it's a fool's hope, but hope is all that's left. And if this is to be our final chapter, then let it be written in our own words. There's something I want you to hear. It was recorded months ago, back when people still believed there would be an after, when scientists, leaders, thinkers, those who had spent their lives searching for meaning, tried to leave something behind. A message, a testament, a last attempt to explain what we were. I press play. The voice is steady, but there's a weight to it. Like they knew, even then, that their words might never be heard. They speak of humanity, not in its failures, not in its destruction, but in its moments of brilliance. The art, the discoveries, the kindnesses, the connections. They speak of how we reached for the stars, how we dreamed of more, how we built and destroyed and built again. They say that if anyone, anywhere is listening, then let this be our legacy, that we were not just what we lost, we were what we created. The recording ends, and for a long moment, I sit in the silence it leaves behind. Is anyone still out there? I've asked that question before, 1,000 times. To a world that once answered in whispers, then static, then nothing. But I ask it again, not because I expect a response, but because I have to try. So this is an open call to anyone, anywhere, still listening. If you can hear this, respond. Tell me your name, tell me your story. Because when I go, I don't want to be the last. I wait. The static hums empty and endless. My fingers hover over the dials, scanning for something, anything. For a long time, there is nothing. And then, a sound, a flicker of a voice, faint, fragile, barely more than a breath. But it is there. One by one, they come through. A woman's voice, trembling but steady. She says she never thought she'd hear another human again. She tells me she is alone, that she always has been. But now, just for a moment, she isn't. A man, his signal weak, his words breaking apart as he speaks. He doesn't beg, doesn't cry. He only thanks me for speaking, for making him feel, even for a moment, like the world hadn't already ended. And then, another voice, a child, whispering something too soft to understand. The signal cuts out before I can ask them to repeat it. More come, some only for seconds before the static swallows them again. Some speak of love, some speak of regret, some say nothing at all, only breathing into the microphone just to prove they are still there. They are fading. I know they won't last, but for now, for just this moment, the world is not yet silent. I close my eyes. For the first time in what feels like eternity, I am not alone. The voices are faint now, distant, but they are there, and that is enough. I look at the monitor, at the dying signal, at the final stretch of time this station has left. The numbers count down, and I know this is it. I should say something profound, something to mark the moment, but there are no perfect words for the end. So I say this: we were here, we lived, and we fought, and we hoped. We reached for something greater, even as the darkness swallowed us whole. And maybe that is enough. Maybe that is all we ever were. The signal flickers. I can feel the silence pressing in, waiting to take my place. I take a breath. And as the transmission fades, as my voice is swallowed by the void, I say one last thing. If there's anyone out there, you are not alone. And then, nothing. This is it. The last broadcast. The final message from a world that no longer exists. I don't know if anyone is listening. I don't know if there's a single person left out there clinging to some dying scrap of hope. But I have to believe, just for a little longer, that I'm not speaking into nothing. I have spent days, weeks speaking into this microphone, sending my voice into the dark. I have told you about the chaos, the desperation, the silence that swallowed the world. I have listened as the last voices faded, one by one, until only I remained. Even in the early days, when people still believed in escape plans and underground bunkers, I understood that this wasn't a disaster we could recover from. This wasn't something we could outlast. But if survival is gone, what's left? I think about the ones who called in before the signal faded. The father who asked only that his daughter's name be remembered. The scientist who begged for someone, anyone, to preserve their research. The voices that whispered into the dark, not asking for help, not pleading for salvation, just wanting to know that someone, somewhere, had heard them. Maybe that's all that's left. Not survival, but memory, proof that we were here, that we existed, that we tried. I don't know if anyone will find this broadcast, if some distant intelligence will stumble upon our last words. Long after we're gone, maybe it's a fool's hope, but hope is all that's left. And if this is to be our final chapter, then let it be written in our own words. There's something I want you to hear. It was recorded months ago, back when people still believed there would be an after, when scientists, leaders, thinkers, those who had spent their lives searching for meaning, tried to leave something behind. A message, a testament, a last attempt to explain what we were. I press play. The voice is steady, but there's a weight to it. Like they knew, even then, that their words might never be heard. They speak of humanity, not in its failures, not in its destruction, but in its moments of brilliance. The art, the discoveries, the kindnesses, the connections. They speak of how we reached for the stars, how we dreamed of more, how we built and destroyed and built again. They say that if anyone, anywhere is listening, then let this be our legacy, that we were not just what we lost, we were what we created. The recording ends, and for a long moment, I sit in the silence it leaves behind. Is anyone still out there? I've asked that question before, 1,000 times. To a world that once answered in whispers, then static, then nothing. But I ask it again, not because I expect a response, but because I have to try. So this is an open call to anyone, anywhere still listening. If you can hear this, respond. Tell me your name, tell me your story. Because when I go, I don't want to be the last. I wait. The static hums empty and endless. My fingers hover over the dials, scanning for something, anything. For a long time, there is nothing. And then, a sound, a flicker of a voice, faint, fragile, barely more than a breath. But it is there. One by one, they come through. A woman's voice, trembling but steady. She says she never thought she'd hear another human again. She tells me she is alone, that she always has been. But now, just for a moment, she isn't. A man, his signal weak, his words breaking apart as he speaks. He doesn't beg, doesn't cry. He only thanks me for speaking, for making him feel, even for a moment, like the world hadn't already ended. And then, another voice, a child, whispering something too soft to understand. The signal cuts out before I can ask them to repeat it. More come, some only for seconds before the static swallows them again. Some speak of love, some speak of regret, some say nothing at all. only breathing into the microphone just to prove they are still there. They are fading. I know they won't last, but for now, for just this moment, the world is not yet silent. I close my eyes. For the first time in what feels like eternity, I am not alone. The voices are faint now, distant, but they are there, and that is enough. I look at the monitor, at the dying signal, at the final stretch of time this station has left. The numbers count down, and I know this is it. I should say something profound, something to mark the moment, but there are no perfect words for the end. So I say this: we were here, we lived, and we fought, and we hoped. We reached for something greater, even as the darkness swallowed us whole. And maybe that is enough. Maybe that is all we ever were. The signal flickers. I can feel the silence pressing in, waiting to take my place. I take a breath, and as the transmission fades, as my voice is swallowed by the void, I say one last thing. If there's anyone out there, you are not alone. And then, nothing. This is it. The last broadcast. The final message from a world that no longer exists. I don't know if anyone is listening. I don't know if there's a single person left out there clinging to some dying scrap of hope. But I have to believe, just for a little longer, that I'm not speaking into nothing. I have spent days, weeks speaking into this microphone, sending my voice into the dark. I have told you about the chaos, the desperation, the silence that swallowed the world. I have listened as the last voices faded, one by one, until only I remained. And now I am fading too. I have no final words of wisdom, no grand speech to mark the end of us. What can be said that hasn't already been spoken in screams and prayers? But if you are there, if you can hear me, if you have made it this far, know that we were here. Know that we lived. And know that we tried. The transmission is weakening. The interference is worse now, breaking apart my words, dragging static through every sentence. I should stop, let it end on my own terms, but then something. A sound beneath the noise. A distortion, low and distant, creeping through the static like a whisper in the dark. It isn't human. The frequency shifts, warps. The pattern is too structured to be random interference, too deliberate. It pulses, repeats, a signal, a message. I hold my breath. Could it be an echo? Some final fragment of our own transmissions bouncing endlessly through space? A ghost of what we once were? Or is it something else? Something listening? The sound fades in and out, just at the edge of understanding. I strain to hear, to pull meaning from the broken fragments. But before I can, the interference surges. The whole transmission stutters. My voice is slipping. The words break apart, scattered between bursts of static. The station is failing. The generators are nearly dead. I try to repeat myself, try to hold on, but it's too late. The signal fractures mid-sentence, swallowing everything. I hear my own voice twisting, warping into something unrecognizable. It doesn't even sound human anymore. Just a faint, distant echo of what was once a man speaking into the void. The broadcast is unraveling. I don't know if I have seconds or minutes left, but I keep talking, even as my voice fragments, even as the darkness closes in. Because if this is how it ends, I won't let it end in silence. The transmission dies. For the first time, there is nothing. No voices, no whispers, no static. Just an absence so deep, so absolute, that it feels as though the world itself has exhaled one last breath and stopped. This is how humanity ends. Not with fire, not with war, not even with a whisper. Just silence. And in that silence, only one thing remains. A final message, drifting through the void, waiting for someone, something, to hear it. And if there's anyone out there, you are not alone. As we wrap up today's broadcast, I want to leave you with this thought. Despite the darkness we face, despite everything we've lost, there's still hope. We're still here. And as long as we keep moving forward, keep building, keep remembering each other, we're not truly lost. No matter what the world looks like around us, there's always something worth fighting for, always something worth remembering. So let's keep going together. Even when things feel uncertain, remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. We might not have the past, but we have today. And that's enough to make tomorrow worth living for. Thank you for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this broadcast, if it helped you feel connected or maybe just a little less alone, please do me a favor. Like this video, share it with others, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything to us. And if you want to hear more of these daily broadcasts, you can also support us by clicking the join button on our channel. Every bit of your support helps us keep going, keep sharing, and keep telling the stories that matter. Until next time, keep safe, keep strong. And remember, even in the silence, we are still here. You're still here. And that's all we need to keep moving forward. See you soon.